Okay, evening everyone, and welcome to the player, the coach, the person. Thank you for joining us again on our weekly coach-related webinar. This evening, I'm really happy to welcome two chaps who've been with Stoke City for a number of years, have played for their rivals. That will be Gareth Owen and Rich Walker. How are we, Gareth, first?
Very good, thanks, Chris. Yeah, really good. Pleased to be here and thanks for having me.
And Rich, how are we doing, mate?
All good, Brownie. And like Gus says, good to have us on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming on. And Rich, I'll start with you. I mean, obviously, we've known each other quite a number of years from when we played at Crewe together. See, I was a year above you, and you probably never actually seen me play football. I don't think. I think I would have been on the physio bench, but the physio bed for most of the time.
I think the first surprise to people is probably that I'm a year younger than you.
Yeah, year younger, I know. And you were head boy, weren't you, of the our first year?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but no, it was good memories, real good memories, and I've got to say you've been modest there. I remember you as a player very well, Brownie, and I watched a little bit of footage from you coaching, and I know you've still got a bit of techers. Fair play.
That's very kind of you, mate. Thank you very much. Rich, so I'll start, like I say, we'll start with you. If you could just give us a bit of a background from a playing perspective, but obviously when you've got into moving into coaching and when that started from, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you alluded to the Crewe days. So I've come through the Crewe Academy as from under 12s onwards. I'm very fortunate to work under fantastic developers in Dario Guardi, Steve Ott, Neil Baker. So even back then, as a kid, straight away the seeds have been sown on how people with such expertise at developing work. So that's going in. I then obviously come through the academy, went on to play over 100 games for Crewe's first team, Championship level, League One level. Released from Crewe, I think 2006, went and joined, dare I say, Port Vale. Had a couple of years, 18 months at Port Vale, who were in League One at the time. Not doing fantastically well as a club. Played there, got paid up after an injury, patella tendonitis, and moved on to Macclesfield. While I was at Port Vale, I did my UEFA B with Jamie Robinson, come in from the FA. Yeah, great guy. So a lot of time for Jamie and did my B. So fairly early on in my career, started laying down the foundations for the coaching. Went to Macclesfield, played under Keith Alexander, God bless. Fantastic fella. Played in a certain way. I mean, I knew we were going to be direct, but to the extent was ridiculous. You know, as a centre half, I went in. I played my first game for Mac on a Tuesday night at Dagenham. I hadn't played for 12 months, and I weren't broadcasting the fact that I'd been injured and hadn't played for 12 months. But I'll get through this game, and as a centre half in a 5-3-2, I was going up for our goal kicks to try and flick them on, going up for throwing. So it was different. It was different, but again, a football experience to be part of. Second season at Mac, as the game got quicker, I was getting slower and slower all the time. When we had to go to a 4, I knew I was done. So I knew I weren't quick enough to play in the league anymore. So straight away I started thinking of what the future looked like. At the end of that season, 2008-2009 season, got in touch with Steve Holland, who was academy director at Stoke at the time, and I said, look, got my B, keen to do some coaching, and he invited me into Stoke, and he said to me, look, I've never seen you coach. He said, you're a good guy, I know you as a guy, and for that I'm sure you'll develop into a good coach. And I took the under-11s. So I worked in the foundation phase as it is, which is from under-9s to under-11s. My group was the under-11s. Steve left to go to Chelsea shortly after. Steve's role at the club was very much observational at that time, just getting a feel for it. I did the under-11s, enjoyed it. It was watered down model of what it is nowadays. Funny enough, in the group at the time was Tom Edwards. Tom's someone who's gone on and played for our first team and England Youth Internationals. Good memories with Tom. Dave Wright, next academy director, really to lay the foundations. Great guy. And I moved to the youth development phase. So worked with all the groups between 13s to 16, with all the groups at different times during the 4 or 5 year period, and thoroughly enjoyed that experience. I think the tests for anyone working with players in the age groups, whether it be in academies or grassroots, there's a lot of tests, psychologically, physically, particularly the sort of the growth and maturation side of it. So that was a fantastic learning experience. Whilst working with the 15, 16s, was always keen to get out on the grass in the morning and watch the PDP staff work. Kev Russell was fantastic to get a gauge on, and eventually I had the opportunity to assist Kev in 2017 with the 18s. Kev moved on to the first team, and I've led the 18s since, as well as leading the professional development phase, which is the under 18s to the under 23s, and thoroughly enjoying it. It's on the grass every day, sort of adding to the fruits of everyone's labours within the academy, and fine-tuning players and hopefully getting them prepped to go into the first team environment.
Brilliant. I mean, give you a bit of a big head. I do speak to a few people in football at home, and they all speak very highly of you. So obviously you're doing something right there, mate. And Gaz, obviously you started out as a young player, didn't you, at the club? And if you could just give us your journey.
Yeah, I started, my affiliation with the club started when I was 8 years old. So I played for every age group, all teams, all the way up to the first team. Played half a dozen times in the first team, and then had a career at sort of League One, League Two level. But yeah, my real affiliation started then. So, and came through the academy system. So when academy sort of first started, I was in sort of the under 17s as it was sort of then. We didn't have an under 17s team, but we formed under 19s. But it was that sort of year. That was the first years that academy sort of came in, and so I can appreciate how it's changed in terms of its infrastructure, everything like that, and likewise the standard, how it's changed as well. But I could also affiliate how a player's journey, so what it looks like for an under 8, what battles that player has at under 8, how does it look, the challenges that brings, and the challenges that parents bring, and things like that at our football club. And I say our football club because obviously I feel privileged to still be here. So yeah, so I went on to 23, played half and then went to sort of an 8-9 year career at League One, League Two level. I was at Stockport, got them promoted to League Two, from League Two to League One as captain. And then, like Rich, finished my career at Port Vale in 2012. And then all through my career, really, education's been a massive part of sort of my life. So I was quite bright at school, did A-levels, didn't do the necessary BTECs. Just I did A-levels, I've got a first-class degree in journalism, and did that well, so we're still playing. And similar to Rich, I was just trying to keep as many doors open as for me as possible. So when my time come that I finished playing, that I had something to go into, and I wanted that to be of my choosing. But so 2012, Port Vale, where I was playing, they went through administration, a lot of boardroom upheaval, didn't get paid, being the PFA rep, having to deal with the fallout from that, and telling lads you're not going to get paid, and trying to help them to manage debts and budgets and things like that. That soured my sort of enjoyment of the game from a playing perspective. I'd always been coaching, but I thought that was a time that I needed to do something else. And then I was fortunate because of my relationship with the club. There was a part-time role going, working with the under 12s under Dave Wright, similar to what Rich has said. And I had a couple of meetings with him and a training session just to prove I was the right sort of person to sort of get back involved from a coaching point of view. So I started back with the club part-time, so I'd say 2012, and then I was also working for the PFA part-time as well, in their education department. So that was my career for 6 months. And then at the end of that season, the coaching role got offered a full-time one. That was, again, just full-time taking under 12s and assisting Rich with the other age groups in the YDP, sort of the 13 to 12 to 16s. And then from that point, my role grew, and I kept picking up bits and pieces all the way through. So I was taking the under 12s, but then I was overseeing the whole programme from the 7s to 12s in terms of the coaches, the sort of curriculum, the players. Then that grew again because we revamped the recruitment area for those age groups. So I was overseeing that programme as well, still coaching. And then I applied for the job, the academy director's job, sort of 4 years ago now, before Gareth Jennings, my previous academy director, came in when Dave Wright left. And I wasn't ready, and I needed to improve myself in a few different areas, one around sort of budgets and finances. And then a little bit of feedback I had was I didn't really have much experience at the 18s and 23s, whilst obviously I knew about professional football and the academy system, and I was doing a lot of stuff to sort of work behind the scenes, that I didn't have that. So when Kev went to join the 23s and Rich was taking the 18s, I sort of put myself forward then, look, I want to go and be an assistant. And that was obviously being Rich's assistant. And to be fair, I'm not just saying that because he's here. I learned a lot about coaching and how to be an assistant, because I think that's a skill set in itself. And so we work sort of well together. He deliver one thing, I deliver something else. Maybe I focus on the individual, or he took the control of the session. And it taught me a lot about coaching. And then sort of 12 months ago, Gareth Jennings left to take up a role at FIFA. And then I put my hat in the ring again. And as it got down to a short list, 3 interviews later with the chief exec, the Coates family, and Bet365, and obviously got the job, and I've been here for the past 12 months.
Brilliant. And what does at Stoke? What does the academy director's role entail? What are your responsibilities on a day-to-day basis?
Basically, oversee everything. I liken it really that you're in charge of a small business, right, if that makes sense. So obviously you're responsible for the operating budget and what that is, and that's into the millions of pounds. You're responsible for all the staff, all the players, and then likewise, so if you're responsible, you oversee the coaching program, sports science program. Yes, you've got heads of department, but they feed into you. So you basically ensuring that people are delivering and players are progressing as you want them to be, and obviously everything that goes with that. And then likewise, my role is then to be the go-between between the academy and the board. So obviously I sit on the board and report to the chief exec and the owners, and giving regular reports about how we're doing as an academy. I have to give a daily report if there's any issues, but then likewise a weekly report of all teams and all players and how they're doing to the chief exec. And then we obviously informally meet once a week just to make sure everything's okay. I sit on the senior management team, so that is the chief exec, the managing director, the head of finance, the head of community, head of commercial, head of media, and we meet once a week, obviously virtually now in this form. We meet once a week just to discuss everything that's going on to the football club. And likewise, I have to have a relationship with the first team manager, so we meet once a month, and if that's formally. Obviously, we have coffees and things like that at the canteen, but formally once a month just to update him on academy progress, and likewise work with him on recruitment and things like that. Look, he might be looking for a centre forward, but we might have an under-18 one who's absolutely flying high, so keeping him abreast of everything that's going on. So it's a role that is a lot of hats for different scenarios, if that makes sense. And you've got to have a decent skill set to work with a variety of different individuals, and it's something I've always prepared for. I've not really wanted to be a first team manager as such. I've always enjoyed coaching and I'm saying working with players, but this is the role I've always wanted to do. And I'm fortunate that I've got that. I mean, I've worked for a football club that's allowed, and myself and Rich have been, we're fortunate that they reward good work. So if you do the work, they'll progress you and move you on, whether that's formally in terms of qualifications or opportunities as well. So it's a fantastic role, and hopefully I'm doing an okay job.
Yeah, good. I was looking on the website earlier. You've got down on if you look at the academy staff in comparison to your kind of first team staff, then your academy staff dwarfs that, doesn't it? And whether that's right or not being updated, but I counted 39 staff on there, based from the academy. So how would that look in comparison, particularly for those people who may be not involved in English football at the moment, and obviously the Cat 1 clubs. How would that compare to your likes of, a Man City in comparison to one of the other clubs, for example?
So if you take Man City sort of will have I'll have a team of first team members of staff per age group, if that makes sense. So each age group, whether that's 9s to 16s, will have 2 coaches, it'll have a physio, it'll have a match analyst, it'll have a sports scientist, it'll have a strength and conditioner purely for that team. Right. And then if you multiply that across the age groups, then you factor in your operations guys, then you factor in your scouts, then you factor in the academy director, the head of coaching, the heads of department, and all of a sudden that's into a couple of hundred people before you even start. Right. For us, obviously, if you've seen the numbers that are on there, they're the full-time people, and we sort of work, aside from sort of coaches who work per age group, you might have a sports scientist that will work in the professional development phase. So he might work across 18s and 23s, or you might have a sports scientist that works in the youth development phase. So we'll work across age groups, so 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, and deliver sessions when he needs to do that. In terms of sort of say staffing, we're probably one of the smallest at Cat 1 level. Right. But then it's still a lot of numbers that you've seen there. We operate sort of the minimum that you have to do for Cat 1. The youth development rules determine how many staff that you have in place who have to allocate so many roles, and we operate sort of the minimum of that. But that, for me, that's not a sign of sort of weakness or of a problem, because for me it's always been quality rather than quantity. And I would say this because I'm in charge of the staff, but I would back our staff against a lot of clubs. Even sort of say some of the clubs that you've just mentioned, that it's all about how you work with the players, the information that you deliver, and the program that you've got on offer. Not necessarily meaning having another 20 staff will make the players any better. It's all about the players, knowing the players individually, and that comes from the skill set of the staff. Yeah.
And when you've stepped into to Gareth's role and having knowing the club like you do, in terms of coming through the phases and working, working there. I mean, what's been the focus for you to really improve on, and what you've been most proud of since you've come in?
Players, obviously Nathan Collins being captain. Rich has coached him more than I have, but as a reflection on the academy, for Nathan Collins to captain the first team, that's a massive fillip in our cap. I get pleasure out of seeing an under 9 improve in a training session as much as I do someone playing in the first team, because it's the passion for the football club which drives me to do the job. Yes, there's certain markers. So when Rich's team beat Chelsea 2-1 in the semi-final of the Premier League Cup, that's a massive pat on the back for all staff, that we are moving in the right direction. But as I said, there's different roles that give you pleasure in sort of different ways. All we keep trying to do is just try and make it better. Try and improve day in, day out, whether that's with the players, whether that's per department, because if we're improving day in, day out, then the players will do that. And then that's a message that you try to get to sort of all the staff all the way through that, because for me, as soon as you think you've cracked it, you're going to make a mistake, or something's going to come along the journey that's going to upset what you're trying to do. But we're doing some good work. They said we're not there yet. We're not sort of definitely not there yet, and we'll keep striving to be better as people. And likewise, if we're doing that, we'll gradually increase the players as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Rich, turning to you, mate. What, in terms of the style of play, or what does your program look like from a 4-corner model approach? How's it done at Stoke?
I think when we talk about our 4 model approach, our values at the club are outrun, outcompete, outthink, and outplay. So there's a huge thing, as has mentioned, the club, and we're both blessed to work for fantastic owners, and they're hard-working people from Stoke-on-Trent area, and the supporters are massive on demanding a work ethic, and the loud supporters when things are going well, and the loud supporters when things aren't going so well. But what they do expect from their teams is to be hardworking and to play on the front foot. So it's something we're huge on. I think we're aggressive in and out of possession in terms of how we play. So out of possession, we want to regain the ball as early and high up the pitch as possible. in possession. We want to control possession for sure, but be purposeful in what we do. So we'll talk a lot about passing properties, which I'll perhaps touch on in a moment. But we want to look for our furthest forward safe pass, if you like. So in behind, furthest player forward, break a line. If not, you're changing the point of attack. So that's how we play. But we believe our playing model is the best suited to develop the individual. So make no bones about it. We want to win every game. We, as staff, as players, we want to win every game. But ultimately, we want to develop players. So winning's not a dirty word in our academy. It's not. But ultimately, we're about developing the individual. So our playing style potentially aid us to win games, but we believe will be developmental needs for the players that we cater for. So just on that, I'll see if I can share something with you, Brian. We'll see how this goes. As I mentioned, I've got some clips that I'm not sure how they'll come through. If they don't, Brownie, I'll show you. I'll do them on a. Let me just see that. If I click that. So can you see the screen now, Brownie?
Yeah, got it now. Yeah. Got the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on this day, it's a game against Newcastle. Gaz was working with me actually. We're playing Newcastle. Yeah. So, and again, there's a lot of talk about tactics and formations. I think what I hopefully get across here is that our tactics, ultimately, what we talk about tactics are principles of play. And if our principles of play and our philosophy is clear throughout, the formation you play doesn't matter. So in this game, we're actually 4-4-2. We've just regained the ball. I'll play it on, but I'll talk about the principles. So I'm not sure if you can see that there, Brownie. We've just played the ball to the left back. We're now into centre midfield. So again, we've got to trace this back now. We're looking in possession for our furthest forward pass. So can we get in behind the opposition? The opposition have got a good shape. We can't get in behind them. Can we break a line? Again, they've got a good shape. It's unlikely. So the place will go out. We'll go outside them. So again, at all times, we want penetration in behind. So I've paused it there. Our tucked in wide right player is looking to penetrate in behind their back line between fullback and centre back. So it's not necessarily this player must run there. This player must run there. It's principles of play. The ball wide, we've got to have penetration in behind. So as you can see, the one goes in behind. Again, another principle of play, ball wide. Nearest midfielder supports backwards a square. So in this situation, fullback comes back to centre mid. And the reason for that will be opposing midfield player, he'll have to screen our centre forward. If he comes out and engages, we go to the centre forward. All right. So it's there. We want depth and width to the attack. So the fullback generates the width. It's common sense. But in this occasion, he generates the width because the winger's gone inside. Again, another principle, winger and fullback on different lines. We're looking to probe, we're looking to go in. We've got him behind him. So we've got penetration in behind, we've got running behind. Now I'll just pause.
I'm losing.
I'll just pause that there. So penetration. You still there, Brownie?
Got you, but it's not great, the line.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just go to some. I'll stop the share and I'll transfer and I'll talk through some slides. Okay. I'll talk through some slides that'll have the same point. So again, if that slide there, we'll talk about something. So move that down here. So I'll come back to that one. So again, this slide will illustrate where we were at in the video. So we're cutting down the wall and the crossing position. So again, principle, we'll talk about sort of 3+1 in the box. Who them players like to be in a 4-4-2, obviously centre forwards, generally opposite winger. There's a decision making, so we want players to have autonomy, but there's a framework to work from. So in this scenario, the support can come from either a midfield player or opposite fullback. And then again, a principle, we'll attack with 6, we'll defend with 5. So we want to secure a defensive structure for the transition. So the 5 will come from a goalkeeper for sure, who's probably at this stage around the centre circle as high as that, protecting space in behind. Centre backs now can go all the way in. So suddenly their centre forward becomes isolated. The centre backs can go all the way in. So we'd encourage our first centre back to go in really tight. Second centre back cover the space in behind. So we'll move it on. Again, these are principles. So gets to play by and when. We've come back out. Same phase of play, but we've come back out. The centre backs are offering depth, but the high, and they're offering depth in relation to the opposition's, how deep the opposition are, and the width's generated from the fullback. So again, fullback and winger on different line, the width has to be generated there. Now this point here, I moved it on slightly. So as you can see, we've got controlling around the box. There's a transition moment that the ball's sort of 50-50, but because of the proximity of the players, because of the structure we're in, we can go after them. And again, that will be inherent in every session we do. But we focus on the transition moments and we go after them.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're aggressive. We've got plenty of bodies high up the pitch, and the 2 centre halves nullify the centre forward. The centre forward's there. So there's pressure on the ball. They can't clear it. We regain it. And again, on that transition, we've got players high up the pitch. So we go in, the ball comes out, we end up with a shot at goal. Now, in relation to that, Brownie, that can look the same no matter what the formations are.
Yeah.
But again, I mentioned we do want to win games. The players should want to win every game. Does it all to staff? We're about development by playing in the manner of which we do and the aggressive nature of which we do. There are returns across the 4 corners. So if I start with the goalkeeper now, the goalkeepers aren't what they used to be, as we know. The physical players and the technical with the feet. So our goalkeeper's as high and advanced as the centre circle. So physically, he's got to be there. Psychologically, to structure the team, it's almost live by the sword, die by the sword. So because we're so advanced and because we're so aggressive, a transition moment, if we're switched off, will get done. And we accept that. But it demands a certain psychological return. The social return, the players recognising that if the fullback's generating the width here, opposite fullback needs to pen and right in and get right up in the position. There, centre midfield players physically will have to cover 6-yard box, and we also want them to get on the ball and develop from the side. And that's just in this area of the field to the final third. And there's
sorry, can you Gareth?
Okay, let me just stop that share. Let me stop that share, mate. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I've got you now.
Okay, sorry about that. But ultimately, I think the point I'd emphasise there, Brownie, is the way we play is aggressive. It will win us games, but it's not about that. It's about developing players, and we will know the way in which we will play will cost us at times, but it'll maximising the learning across the 4 corners for the individuals involved, and ultimately that's what we're about. So I'd like to think our programme has like I say, a lot of staff in, but staff who've got good experience at developing players, good experience within the game, good knowledge to be able to pass that on. Now, how that's transferred is done in a variety of ways. So we want our players to be independent decision makers, but there's got to be the structure and the framework for them to understand the core principles, the philosophies to execute the game plan, and also nurture their and impose their own individual abilities on the game. And that runs right the way through. Anything you want to add on that, Gaz?
Yeah, and then that just drip feeds all the way down. So yeah, that's what you see at sort of PDP. But as Rich sort of said, that is built on from it starts at 9 when they first come. Well, obviously 7s and 8s when they first come in. So it all builds and all goes all the way through. So we'll be expansive. We'll try and we will coach the individual within the team setting. And you have to have the team around that, and the team sort of things and practice how we want to play, because like I said, that builds on the experiences, and that builds on the sort of the knowledge and the ability of the individual. And so that has to start at FP for me. That's where I think people lose sight of how important the 7s to 11s program is, because if I say we, and that's because I used to work there, but if we aren't getting the basics right, being have people who are athletically okay, have people who are good 1v1, have people who can handle a ball. Rich can't put this meat on the bones from a positional point of view individually if they can't do that. And that's not to say Rich doesn't work a lot on the technical side of the game, because they do, because you're always still learning at those ages. But it starts at sort of FP, moves all the way through into PDP, and that's why you need specially skill set of staff in that area who know how the kids learn at those specific ages, because otherwise, if you don't know that, you can't do the stuff that we want to do with them. Yeah.
And who's part of that, putting the structure of that framework in place and refine, and how often is it refined, and is it a group of you, or who's it done by?
Each department has its own heads. We have a head of coaching, Jimmy Hunter, who was saying these messages that we're saying to the kids sort of many moons ago when me and Rich first started. So a lot of the infrastructure is put down to him, and have his ideas. Yes, but using the sort of knowledge of myself, Rich, or other staff who work in those areas about, right, what information do we need to deliver at what certain time? What stage of learning are the kids at? What's the priority at this age group and at that age group? And we've all contributed to that, and we've all contributed to the syllabus in terms of, let's say, how we play, what's prioritised, what skill sets we're working on, and then we have different philosophies for different things. But there's a group of us who've been around it purely because we've been able to have continuity of staff. Yeah. It's not one person coming in with a load of different ideas, and all of a sudden he's gone. Then we have someone else in with a load of different ideas. Because we've had the continuity of staff, because we've got good staff, we've been able to constantly reevaluate our programme. And the guys, the coaches, they're very thorough in their evaluations and reflections as they are their application. So every session, every game, they're constantly trying to push themselves, reflecting on the session. Have we delivered what we said we delivered? What was my coaching style like? And because if you're doing that, then you can contribute to it on a cycle basis, on a season basis, on a yearly basis, to come up with the sort of the program that we've got now. And I'm not saying now we play it as any different to anyone else does, but what we're saying, it works for us, and we have seen results in the players coming through that are of a better standard, better athletically, more robust, and can play football. And our productivity rankings are sort of showed that recently. So we are doing some good stuff. It is working for us. But if you want to play a different way, how we do it might not work for you. It's just that we want to play high intensity football, and then how does that look like from everyone's department and through the age groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly stands out, the continuity, obviously, with the staff. Is it important for you to have ex-players or have come through the system at Stoke? There's a few in there that have been at the club. Is that important?
For me, yeah. I think you've got whatever staff member you've got to have affiliation with the club. Now, that's whether you're a former player, that's whether you played for the club, the club is your employer. You must have an affiliation and want the club to do well. Because if you've got that, you've got, I say, as me as sort of in charge of the staff, you've got a chance of improving, and people want to stay for a long term. People want to be part of a project. People aren't just here to, let's see if a Man United job comes up. I'm not saying that it does happen, and we still have that now, but I think anyone who comes in has to have an affiliation with the club and understand that the process sort of our work is it's club first. So if we have to be, and the reason has been, if we haven't got a club to work for, we haven't got a job. Second, it's players second. If we haven't got any players, again, as coaches, as sports scientists, as sort of secretaries, we haven't got a job. So those two will always come first, and then it's the staff sort of third. And then because of that, then you hopefully can build up that affiliation with the club. I think a good staff has a mixture of all backgrounds, of abilities, of different sort of skill sets, because you could be the best player and understand the game, but then can't communicate properly to a player. So then his partner might be someone who does communicate better with the players, but needs to improve on his football knowledge. So the key bit is having a multi sort of skilled workforce of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different, say skill sets to really communicate with the players. And I think that's the best bit of our staff is we have got former players who've played in the Premier League, former players who played at League One, former players who played at grassroots level, former players that have been released at 16, and what that needs. And likewise, someone who worked in the community who's just very good working with 8 to 9-year-olds in a mass participation and getting on their wavelength. So we've used to say who's better and who's not, but the key is having a multi-skilled skill set and then placing them in those areas where they can have the maximum return. Yeah.
And then with that, I mean, with the continuity, which I think is very important, but you kind of sometimes, not border on, but it's, if you've got someone at a club, obviously been there a long, long time, and you don't want them to get stale, how do you, now you're obviously managing all the staff, both of you have obviously come through the phases, but how do you keep people, energized and fresh, and what
it's a manner of ways, really. So all players have their development plan, and then likewise all staff have their own development plan, and that's on sort of key characteristics. The job description. So when you sign up and you come to the club, what you're actually paid to do. So the basics of your job description. So you'll have a development plan that sort of encompasses that. And then as a coach, you have your sort of a separate one that's basically your coaching sort of program, your coaching development plan. So what do you want to work and what do you want to get better at, whether that's communication, whether that's timekeeping within the session, whether that's technical knowledge or whatever that is, because core competencies that we call them, over what actually do you need to get better at. So constantly, and then likewise, the CPD program, the head of coaching, myself, will work with the coaches on a sort of weekly, monthly basis by watching sessions and watching games. And then on the back of the development plan, I can then look at, so if Rich needs to improve his communication, for example, I'll specifically watch him around the game and the session and not just the players, and sort of work that way. So we're massive on sort of CPD in terms of improving the coaches, because if you're constantly wanting that improvement in yourself as a coach, that enthusiasm for learning will go to your players. So if you haven't got that, if you're happy just to, I know what I know, quite quickly you'll get found out, because players will find you out because you maybe not as appetite for learning as what you have. And then likewise, other staff will be putting pressure on you to sort of like, well, what CPD have you done? Is it a formal one? And do you need to go into a school to sort of see how they might work on their communication? So we do a lot of stuff about working internally as well as sort of learning externally. And if we can utilise another sport, a school, another qualification, then that forms that development plan that each individual's got.
Yeah, good. And Rich, you spoke highly of the coach education at the club. That's what one of actually Rich Kerr's just asked there. It's, how does coaching CPD look within the academy? So if you could, if you can give some examples of that, it'd be great.
Yeah, Gaz mentioned Jimmy Hunter, who's our head of coaching. He's top drawer, and I think Gareth and myself benefited from Jim's expertise there, as of all the staff. Jimmy was doing CPD sessions with the staff for a long time before a lot of other players, other clubs were doing it, in the sense of sessions were filmed, recorded, and there was a big emphasis on first and foremost staff evaluating themselves, watching themselves back, and having a look at that, then presenting to Jimmy what their findings were. And part of that process then developed, I guess, people who were independent learners. As staff, that was the case. And again, the culture across the club and the academy is very much on a learning environment. We want that for everyone. So Jimmy particularly drove the way with that. And in addition to Jimmy, we've also got Joe Dixon, who's our club psychologist, who's top drawer. So Gaz has alluded to communication there. I think in coaching, you can talk a lot about things like Q&A, question and answers. Well, there's a place for Q&A, but there's a way of doing it as well. So again, with Jimmy and Joe's support, even looking at that, what do you always need an answer if you throw a question out there? Are you comfy with throwing a question out there that might not get answered for a minute, and silences like that? Are you comfy with them awkward silences? What's the value in asking a question to someone who might be on the back foot, and just this sort of thing? So from a CPD point of view, Jimmy and Joe particularly have done fantastic with that. As well, we come together as staff. So You mentioned about how do you keep staff hungry, keep staff going. I think we feel like we're part of the process, and we are included in that. So we have regular CPDs internally, like Gaz said. So there's a lot of stuff going around, people to present on them CPDs. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer feedback, and the program's always evolving. So everyone's constantly evolving individually, and the program's evolving all the time. So I think it keeps people hungry on that sense. And then I'll also bring into it the head of sports science. I think we were ahead of the field on the sports science aspect by and large, in terms of growth and maturation, as staff understanding the needs of players, where they're at, PHV aspects in terms of in the youth development phase, going through puberty, and things like that. And then you link the sports science aspect and the training philosophy, if you like, from a physical point. The football's at the centre. So work to rest ratios incorporate physical returns, but also make you as a coach know that if you've got a rest period of a minute when the ball's not rolling, you've got to be sharp and you've got to be detailed in what you deliver and how you deliver that, and the variety of interventions. So there's a lot of depth to it. One of the things that Jim has brought in was a coaching theme of the week. So coaches will be armed with a Super Sunday where the emphasis might be on the game on that Sunday, being a sort of the emphasis being on winning, but highlighting to the players the process it takes for them to win. And then other weeks will be Silent Sunday, in which the coach is mute by and large, and the players have that autonomy to drive it and lead it. Strategic Sundays. So again, different sort of toolboxes that develop the coach and take him outside his comfort zone at times, but ultimately develop the players and give them a good understanding and give them a well-rounded view in terms of the psychological approach as well. But at the core, we want good technical players, and there's good detail got to be relayed, and that's got to be delivered all the time. So, yeah, Jimmy's done a lot, and the program's very good and kicking on all the time.
Right, Gareth, from going on to that, I noticed some of the work that you've done from a like social side with the players. Some of the off the field stuff was interesting. If you could let us know what you've been up to there, please.
Yeah, that was because I've been quite big on education, sort of coming through my sort of journey. It wasn't just about football. I was always toying with sort of education, and obviously my own CPD with places I've been and sort of stuff I've sort of been into. That for me, if you develop the person, you'll develop a player. Now that it might sound sort of, well, yeah, that's sensible, and it might sound really, but some people I think neglect the person, his needs, and the information that he needs, and where he's at in terms of his learning, and sort of the skill sets that enable you then to get through that information from a technical and tactical basis. And I was always keen for, look, practically, if a boy comes in at 8 and stays till he's 18, that's 10 years of his life that he's dedicated to that football club. So as an academy, we all know the percentages of people getting through, which is very, very slim. There's a chance, and that's how I try and sort of say there's always a chance of sort of getting through, but we know it's slim and we know it's tough. So whenever a player sort of leaves us, what have we done to contribute to him as a person, and how are we developing skill sets during sort of the 9s to sort of 18s program that he can transfer then to any walk of life? So whilst I mentioned each player has his own development plan, part of that is technical, tactical, physical, social, as you might, and psychological, as you might expect most programs are. We introduced another area that's sort of developed on the person and developed on learning outside of their football environment. So it could be some players have got learn guitar, some players have got learn a new language, some people just behave in school because that's where they're at. So and it then just generates conversation and gets players thinking about other things apart from football, because if you're not careful, whilst you have to be obsessed and for it to dominate your life, there is times where you need to switch off. So how else can we do that way? And then throughout the program, we do similar to work with sort of Richard said with sort of Joe Dixon, a psychologist. It's demonstrating characteristics that you want a good person to have. So that is leadership. So how do we go about that? That might be taking team talks. That might be leading match analysis sessions. It might be sort of problem solving. So mini games, right? You've got to solve the problem. How do you do that? It's not necessarily on the football pitch, but off the pitch as well. Stressing the importance of sort of self-learning. So this time has sort of emphasised that even more, that what you're doing yourself to make yourself a better player and not just relying on us as coaches. So there's certain characteristics that and going back onto that, communication is the other one, about how to communicate properly, how to deliver a presentation, how to speak, how to have an opinion, how to back up that opinion, how to sort of have a knowledge or a thirst for knowledge, and sort of how do we do about that. So I think my biggest belief is, if you're developing those characteristics in your program as well, it'll help your coaching, it'll help your sports science work, it'll help your education work, because those skill sets can go into the sort of teaching industry, into banking industry, into any sort of walk of life. And I think we've got a moral obligation to work on those skill sets as much as we have developing footballers.
That's brilliant to hear. I mean, we spoke to David Wright a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking or raving about the support system that Norwich have for the players that they release or obviously get injured or whatever. And so that's it's refreshing to hear, because I know that there's still obviously issues when players are going to get released and players are going to get injured, aren't they? But what can you do for those players? And if you are doing all that, for all the way through, then hopefully leads them into careers where they can go and be successful, either still within a football framework as such, or in other industries. So it's good to hear. Do you have any kind of relationship partnerships? Obviously, you've got the owners. Is there anything there where they might do something with the players? That's something that I've always thought about. Is that obviously generally most football club owners obviously have made their money in different industries, and for those players who maybe get released and have been with the club particularly a long time, where they can find them an internship or an apprenticeship, or however they see it.
Not so much with obviously the industry, the gambling industry. You don't want to promote that so much, any young players. But no, we've part of our sort of coaching program, we invite back former players. So we've got 2 former scholars now on the payroll coaching with us part time, who were released at. One was released at 18 and one was released at 19. They've gone off, tried to do the semi-pro route, sort of part-time coaching, and maybe doing a little bit of sort of work on the sides. But we've invited them back, so we try and keep that relationship with them as much as we can. And likewise, it might lead to full-time employment for them. Obviously, they're just part-time at the minute, but the next time a vacancy opens up, they will be at the front of the queue. So, as again, going back to the previous point, is look, we'll help and assist wherever that individual wants us to go. There's nothing formal in terms of, right, we can signpost you to an internship here or a scholarship somewhere else in America or a different country or anything like that. But if we're developing those skill sets, we try to get them back and working for us whatever way we can. Obviously, coaching's a big one for that, and likewise for me, I've got players then educating other players about what the system's like, what the journey's like, because like I said, it's not just about what goes out on the pitch and sort of the stuff that the battles that they came into contact with. Yeah, but I think that's a big strength of our program as well, that how we look after the players that exit us, both with the skill sets that we provide them, and then likewise the opportunities that maybe we can lead to them in the future.
Yeah, good. And from a recruitment perspective, I mean, you're in arguably one of the toughest geographically areas, where you're hitting into the northwest clubs. Your Man United, obviously, those obviously who don't know England that well are listening in, but Liverpool, Everton, Blackburns, whoever it may be, and then obviously you've got the Midlands clubs as well, very close by, and obviously Crewe nearby as well. We've always produced players. How do you deal with that?
It's one of the hardest battles that we've got. I think once we've got them in, we're very confident that we'll improve any player in a variety of ways and give them the best opportunity we can. But actually getting them into the building is one of the hardest things of what we do. For me, the recruitment is one of the massive arms of a successful academy. If you don't get your recruitment of staff and players right, you're always going to be fighting battles sort of to moving forward. So we sort of build the academy on 3 things: recruitment, the environment, the opportunity. The environment, the opportunities we can take care of to a degree. Obviously, recruitment, we have to really fight hard for the players that we've got. And I think to get the players in, you've got to have a program or a product that works. So you've got to have someone at the top who's walked the walk, plays in the first team. That counts for a lot. So you've got to have players in the first team that showcase that with hard work, look where you could have got. There's got to be an end point. There's got to be an opportunity. And then a biggest strength of our programme is that personal touch. Obviously, Manchester City and the sort of resources they've got, they'll be seeing the same players that we are. But maybe they don't always get treated as well as they might do here. And that's not to say we give them everything, because we don't. We can't give them as much kit. We can't give them as many overseas trips. We can't do that. We haven't got the finances to do that. But what we can do is treat them as a person, treat the parents as people, and have an open door policy that means that we're treating the players as if they're our sons. I know I haven't got kids. I know Richard has, and likewise many people have. But I treat them though as if it's my son or my brother, and that's how much detail that goes into their planning. That's how much thought goes into their journey, their programs, and that's how welcome we try to make them. And so we try to work on a basis of 90% of the best players in Stoke-on-Trent come to play for us. Because of that, like I said, there's always one that gets turned by the superstardom of a bigger club. We can't always control that, but at least we know about them, and sort of keep tracks. And we keep tabs on them. We keep working with them, and keep speaking to the parents just to make sure they're happy. And that counts for a long way if they do get released. And then, so if we're doing that, we then branch out into the sort of the next surrounding area. So we do a lot of good work in Manchester. And pick up boys from under Man City and Man United's noses, because we work differently in terms of, similar to what Rich was saying, this works to the scouts as well. We don't just look at the here and now. We try to sort of forecast where could we get a player to. So we might see a really good move or really good athlete who's in Manchester, maybe needs a little bit of work technically and tactically. We'll take a chance on that player because we back our staff to improve any player. So that's how we get a lot of success, and we prove right with that with some of our under 15s, under 16s groups. So we do a lot of work there, and then at 16 we might have a good group or good core, but we branch out into Europe to see what else is sort of out there, because it's our belief that if you gradually keep increasing the standard, however that may be, your individuals will gradually keep increasing as well. So if we've got a really good right back, but then we might see we haven't got a very good right winger, left winger, so we might not be getting tested so much in training. So we go and maybe recruit one that's really going to test him, and then gradually they're going to compete in themselves, and then individually at heart they're going to improve as well. So we think about that detail in our planning and our recruitment as well. So what does the individual, has he got a chance of getting into our first team? But likewise, will he help the group to really compete against someone to make that individual better as well? And so we try and sort of work a little bit differently than just, he's a good player, let's get him in, and then out you go again. We really have to work ourselves as staff to get them better. Right,
brilliant. Thanks, Gaz. I'm going to go into some questions now because we've got quite a few coming up, and you're talking about players competing and bringing each other on. There's an old centre-back partner of yours on Rich asking a question. Stephen Foster's but honestly want to know what percentage of work goes into making your players athletes. And Foz obviously went on and played, done very well for himself, did it at Barnsley. I'll let you go on then, Rich.
Yeah, I suppose if he's listening, I best say what a good player he is. He's a good friend of mine, really top player, real top player. So fortunate to play alongside Foz for many years. So it's good to hear you listening in, Foz. In terms of programme, the football's always at the centre of what we do. So Gaz has mentioned about recruitment there. We want to recruit athletic boys, but obviously not just athletes. We want to recruit potential Premier League players, and without a doubt that the game's only getting quicker, and you've got to be able to get about a pitch. So in terms of the percentage that's developing an athlete, I think you can't make a slow player fast. You can make a slow player quicker. You can make a fast player quicker, but you're not going to make massive inroads into that. So recruitment's key in terms of the raw material that you get, which Gaz has alluded to already. In terms of percentage of the programme, a typical week, they'll all get gym sessions throughout the academy in different ways, shape or forms at different ages. At BDP, they'll have 3 gym sessions a week by and large, of which they work lowers and uppers, depending on where their week's looking in terms of games, etc. In terms of the physical corner, massively at our club, it's integrated into the football. and the football's at the centre. So we have a periodisation model that we believe will keep the intensity of our play high, and as well as that, we think the physical work's done with the ball. So it's maximal gains from a technical point of view, whilst the players are getting fitter doing that. In terms of percentage dedicated to athletes, I couldn't necessarily say that there's a massive amount because the four corners are so entwined. Again, the 3 gym sessions a week, nutrition's a big part of the programme, and obviously the intensity of which we play means that fat switch fibres will be moving all the time.
I mean, that's just follow on from that. That starts at sevens, really, because the group of sevens that they have, that whether that's a part of their sort of syllabus is the multi-sports element and sort of body weight control element. So the exercises to develop. So it's not a squat, obviously, with weight, but they're getting to control their own body weight, which means it's been proven then a long-term athletic development model means that if you're getting those exercises in, you can then obviously work on be more rangy athletes, flexibility is better, control of your body's better, and over time then build up that strength and power development getting into Rich's phase. So it does start lower down and then obviously moves up further, but it's every session across the 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s has a multi-sport stroke athletic development sort of area to it, as well as football.
Great, thanks. You've got a number of questions, just trying to fit everything in. Are you okay to stay on for 10 minutes?
Yeah, sound mate. Yeah, no problem.
Right.
Yeah,
great, thanks. Badr has sent a number of questions in, and he did in the last webinar. So I'm just going to kind of put a hybrid together of his questions. Really, is I think Badr's from over here in the UAE, or he might be in Saudi. I'm not too sure, but he's asked in terms of Arabic players and Arabic coaches, what do they need to succeed in England?
So in terms of the sort of work permit, so take players, for example, to begin with now, it's very difficult for players under 18 to get a work permit to sort of play in this country. Obviously, over 18, you have to be in national teams and the position of your national team and all that to get a work permit. So obviously, over 18 enables more possibilities for players to do that. Under 18, it's very difficult. We can't move a boy from sort of an Arabic country into our country at 15 because we have to prove that he's come for anything apart from football to get around child trafficking issues and things like that. So we don't tend to sort of operate any players from outside of the EU up until 18 because it's very difficult to sort of say get a work permit for that. In terms of coaches, you have to have the bare minimum sort of qualifications. So to work in academy, you have to have a UEFA B license. And because of the amount of people getting B licenses now, sometimes we're a bit more selective and have A licenses as well. So before you even have an interview, you have to have the minimum qualifications for that. And then aside from that, people have to factor in is that if you're offering someone a job, you're trusting someone's kid with that. So you need to know a little bit more about them. So it's not very often that clubs, and this is not to say that it's jobs for the boys as such, but it's not very often clubs employ staff that they don't know something about, whether you've coached against them or you can find out a little bit about them, because ultimately, as I said, you're trusting someone's son with that person of staff. So you have to know that you can trust them and be able to trust them with the players. So for me, obviously, how we started, we dipped a toe in the water. So we managed to get something part-time, and then we could then prove that we were good for a full-time job. So anybody who wants a job, I'd say to sort of get involved as much as you can in the early stages, whether that's part-time, whether that's scouting, just get a foot in the door somehow to then gradually get the full-time job. And because there is only an infinite amount of full-time jobs, it's obviously very competitive, as you can imagine. But as I said, we try and make our staff ethnicity, our staff makeup as diverse as possible, because our players are as diverse as possible. So it's important that we have that as well.
Great. One for you, Rich, would be Paul Frazier at Middlesbrough. He's the 23s at Middlesbrough. I'm sure you know one another, don't you?
Yeah.
And he's put, how have you dealt with players that have played or appeared within the first team that have come back down to the 23s football? Do you have strategies that help players cope with this?
Craig's great to see you, pal. Hope you're well. Hope the family's well. Great question. I think the transition for a lot of academies and is the players that go between 23s and first team. It takes a lot of managing. Now, first and foremost, we're fortunate that Kev Russell, who leads our under 23s, was assistant manager at Peterborough for many years, and Preston. So he's got an understanding of first team and how it looks and what the pressures are from that end of it as well. We're also blessed that Rory Delap works in the first team fold, who's had previous academy, previous experience at coaching at academy with the under 18s at Derby. So we've got that, but it is obviously needs to be done carefully. The transition of the players program. Gaz obviously has regular meetings, as he's mentioned, with the manager. Kev is the prominent person who liaises with the first team. So in terms of their direct program, for sure that takes consideration, because the first team could be prepping for a game. The player's just doing shape when individually he might need, from a physical point of view, a hit session. And from a development point of view, we've got to make sure that he gets that development work. So Roy takes a good lead on that, on any work that needs to be done there. From a physical point of view, Paul White, our head of sports science liaison with Gareth. So that handover there's got to be communication. Communication is key. And I think then the right people in the right roles to do that. In terms of players who perhaps have a sniff of first team and come back, I think the things Gazza spoke about developing the players holistically throughout our programme hopefully stand them in good stead. So ultimately our players at every age group will experience aspects of success and aspects, for want of a better word, of failure. And across their journey to have bumps in the road, a large portion of our boys will experience playing in the age group above. Some will play 2 age groups up. So coming through the system, hopefully they've experienced that, and coming back down, because it's often easier playing in the age group above where there's perhaps less pressure. So maybe an academy player who trains with the first team gets a little bit of a look through with a positive gaze, for example. But it's hopefully we've prepared the lads along their journey that they've encountered that. But for sure, it's a challenge within itself, for sure. But like I say, we've got the right staff in the right place, I think, to manage that. And generally speaking, we've got humble boys, humble young men who generally speaking will come back and always give the best. But it's certainly a complex issue, that the handover, particularly when the players are sitting perhaps between the 23s and first team. But I hope that's gone some way to answer that one.
Yeah, great, Rich. Thank you. And a nice question here from Steve Law, who always tunes in, shall we say, on, from a grassroots perspective. He's put, evening chaps, really like the slide and playing philosophy. How does that transpose to grassroots under 8-9? Do you simplify, less points, simpler content, or is that slide consistent for every age group?
No, obviously that's the finished article with all the information on. What we've done as a group of staffers, so then broke that down really in that, what do we need to focus on across all the age groups, all the way down to sort of the under 8s. For me, team stuff under 8s, we're not. Yes, you need a team and you need to be in some sort of structure to enable them to maximise being on the ball, if that makes sense. But there's a key phrase that we use, so it's obviously staying on the ball, which probably most people have heard, but that's not necessarily dribbling. We sort of incorporate a little bit of decision making in that. But we don't neglect the team at that age, because, as I said, you need the team. There's no point being a really good centre forward if you've got poor midfield players and defenders, because they need to get the ball to the forward. So you need to coach the team in some area and put some structure in it to enable them to sort of demonstrate the individual skills that they've got. But the team gets less of a focus sort of low down. It's sort of more of a focus on the, like say, the technical aspects, as you'd expect that most is. And we don't neglect winning still. So it's still part of the syllabus is about winning, because we need to garnish that sort of desire to win at such a young age, because they're sponges, really sponges at that age. So our program's packed with a lot of variety. And if they've got the harbour those aspirations of self-learning and a little bit of winning, then that's going to make the job better as you go along. So, as I said, what Rich's slide looks slightly different though down, and we have sort of phase priorities. So the foundation phase, what it looks like from a technical, tactical, psychological syllabus perspective as well.
Great. And I'm going to kind of put two questions together for this one. Murray Jones and Anshul. Anshul's asked it on both sides, but so basically, so Murray's saying, Gareth, you have a unique DNA for the club outside of many programs. Do you profile your players around characteristics of the philosophy, culture of the club? And at the same time, Anshul's saying, at what age do you start training players on specific game models, or you train them on general principles around perception and decision making throughout? I mean, can you kind of answer that as one really?
Yeah. So from a recruitment perspective, you're still recruiting someone's, at whatever age, you're recruiting their strengths. So what have they stood out to you for? Now, that not necessarily means that it could be a sort of a technical aspect. It could be a work ethic. It could be a physical aspect. So you're recruiting someone's sort of skill sets of what is their strength. So what have they stood out for that scout? What has stood out for that coach? And then it might, and then in the back of your head with the sort of the phase specific sort of syllabus that we've got, the position specific syllabus later on, where might that person sort of fit in? But ultimately, they've got to have a skill that stood out, that's above average in whatever area. And that's how we try and work. It's not necessarily mean he's going to be the greatest technician, but he could be a really good athlete and vice versa. And how do we try and sort of work, and where might they sit sort of within that? Part of that is a psychological focus. So we look at the skills, the stuff I said before, around sort of how hard do they work, what's the sort of leadership style like, and we sort of try and profile them sort of a little bit that way as well, because as we back ourselves to improve everyone as a player with a technical and tactical aspect, but we not necessarily can improve everyone if they don't want to learn, if they don't want to sort of respond to sort of the information that we've got. And that's not to say we take good boys or goody two-shoes all the time. We will take some real characters, but they have to sort of demonstrate an application to work and application to learn. And those characteristics I mentioned earlier, we try and look for when we're going out recruitment and going out working as well. In terms of sort of systems and sort of play, we sort of generally, it's principle focused. It's not really about system. It's about principles of the game. So we'll be working with our under 9 centre forward about running in behind and trying to get onto balls over the top, and what that might look like, and what little bits and pieces just to get him running in behind. Because it don't matter about being offside, just keep running behind. And then gradually then that's working on coming to feet as he goes older and gets older, and then works that way. So our systems per player not irrelevant as such. We don't really have a favoured system. It's all about principles of the game. So the stuff that Rich mentioned about the principles of the game, how that looks like lower down, and we'll pick up bits and pieces of that, whether it be 8s, 9s, 10s, whether it be 18s, 23s.
Yeah, and you're not so rigid as some clubs. I'm hearing from David Wright a couple of weeks ago in terms of how they profile players, that they only want certain players. And I mean, I'm not sure if I'm overly keen on that sometimes from my perspective, but is it how you just shaking your head there, guys? Is it that's not what you do?
No, I know people always sort of trying to get into the recruitment, guys, is that it's athletically capable, because we all know the game's getting quicker, stronger, faster. As Rich mentioned, we can make someone quicker, but we can't make him quick. So they've got to be athletically capable to play our way of playing, and that's a high-intensity football that Rich has already mentioned. So they haven't got to be a certain size. They're not interested in how big they are, aside from being a goalkeeper, really, that size comes into it. But we do try and educate the scouts in that they are athletically capable. And that's a prerequisite we probably don't sort of change on, really. We don't sort of forego, because if you can't cover the ground in the game of football, then you're going to struggle. However, we do factor in the maturation, the dates of birth, how much growth they've had, and where they are sort of on their growth pathway on making that decision. So it's not just okay, oh, he can't run. It's a case of, right, he's maybe struggling to get across the ground. Is he going for a growth spurt? Is he, well, before making a decision, if sort of that makes sense. But as I said, we don't play a set way. We're very flexible on that. We have principles of the game, and we don't pigeonhole players into positions. We sort of try and comes back to what is that boy actually really good at, and how good is he? And so what's he done that's above average, that's alerted people, and then how can we work with that to maybe put them in a position later on down the line, or maybe do we just keep him with the skill set he's got and dip around different positions because he might be a really good 1v1 player, and so we don't really know where he's going to be just yet. He might be a forward, might be a winger, might be a midfield player. So how does he fit into how do we cater for that individual as well?
Yeah, right. And Rich, Michael Brady, who's out here in Dubai, runs a team in the UAE second division. I'm going to put his question with, it's what education do you give to young players regarding social media? And another ex-teammate of yours who is also coming on the coach, the person on Saturday, play for England, is Dean Ashton. He's asked, are agents' social media money a big issue to deal with in the current game?
Yeah, again, good evening, Dino. Good to see you. So yeah, obviously social media, it's obviously fairly new in the last sort of 10 years, and it's probably something that the three of us have evolved to and suddenly found out how that works. I think you see more and more often that people as celebrities are getting bit from things that they've put years and years ago. So the education goes on. The Premier League and the EFL lead a good player care programme that our player care officer, welfare officer Stephanie Wakeling and Greg Briggs Education get good education around the social media aspects and educating the players. Got a good understanding of what the content is on the players' sort of public social media outlets. So that education does go on, and it is tricky for sure, but the education goes on. I think the players will know more about social media than I will. So again, it's important to have the right people coming in. So we do have those workshops for the players as well as for the parents as well. So from the social media aspect, yeah, they get the education as well as knife crime. We've had people coming in about knife crime that, again, without a doubt, there'll be some players in our academy who are in certain areas that people who you may come across that will have knives on them. So stuff like that, the addiction clinics, we get good education, again, which is part of the holistic development for the players. So yeah, that is tricky. In terms of the agents, I'm fortunate. I just back the agents over to Gaz. Obviously, I'm sure we all know people who are agents who are good people, and I'm sure there's people with the best wishes of the players. I think what I would say is our players need to trust us, because ultimately, when our players, it comes time that they're released, we work our socks off for the players to line them up with the best club for them. And do that. So I think it's important that players trust the clubs. But for sure, I know certain players are at the stage of their career where they will have agents. But yeah, when the agents come to me, I just palm them off over to Gaz, and I'll develop players and coach, and Gaz can deal with the politics that come with that.
And that's getting even more so. So we're having agents watching under 14 games because if the agents are working out that if you don't get them early enough, then you're not going to have them sort of later on when they get to Rich's ages. So we have to sort of battle sort of that. You're not allowed to have an agent till you're 16, but 16, but we're having agents watching some of our young players. So especially when the boys go to play for England and things like that, they come back with 4 or 5 different agent numbers, and you think this is bizarre, this is mental. But coming back to Rich's point of education, that's where you'd like where we try and work with our parents. We have workshops that are specifically for agents and social media and all those sorts of things for parents as well as players, and that's all the way. That's quite low down, because look, you only really need an agent. You guys know if you're getting a new contract or if you're moving clubs, and we all know how agents tend to sort of make money. And let's say there's some good ones and some not so good ones. All we try and do is try and work with the parents that if they are contacted, then let us do some digging. I'm not going to say you can't have an agent, but let us do some digging between myself, Rich, Kev, Kev Russell, who've been around the game a lot, and we'll know enough people to know, hey, he's good, he'll look after you, or he's got your best interests at heart, or no, he's a rogue one, he's going to try and shop you, or try and make some money off you when not really caring about your career. So all we're trying to do is that, and that's the message that we've read to them, that you'll come into contact with an agent. You probably have a club might be chasing you, but let us work with you and help you, and that's ultimately what we try and do. And say, look, if you've got a pool of 4 agents, let us know who they are, and we'll try and say, look, that's 1, 2, and 3 in our opinion, but ultimately it's down to you.
Yeah, it's funny you say that actually about the going away with England, because I mentioned to you the other day that I was back last February, and I was lucky enough to spend a week with the England under-16 team, in sitting on their meetings and watch their training and what have you. And they played Brazil, France and Norway. And those 3 games were full of agents, but full of agents from overseas, from big clubs in Europe. And obviously Rory Delap's son was playing. And it was interesting. And even, at St. George's Park, and they're not allowed in a certain area, you've got to go into certain areas, but you're up at the Starbucks, and you can tell them a mile off as well, can't you? And they're, standing there having a cup of coffee, and then just little high fives or hellos to the players and what have you. It's some industry, and that leads me quite nicely on to say that we've got Jamie Morley actually on a week on Saturday. Jamie is coming on, and he's the CEO of New Era. He's the Rio Ferdinand's agent. He works for New Era, but he also played at Crewe for a while, didn't he, Rich? He was a character.
Great fella.
Yeah,
great fella, and it's good to see him do so well.
Yeah, it is. Just to let everyone know, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Everyone who's, I'll say my thank yous to the guys in a moment, but we've had over 60 people at one point earlier, which is fantastic. Really appreciate people joining us. If you could, and if you've enjoyed it this evening, it'd be great if you could obviously get it out on social media, send it to your friends, whoever who enjoys the game, because I think these are great insights. The guys are giving their time up for this, and I really appreciate it. Saturday, so we're very lucky to get Dean Ashton coming on to talk about his career. The theme is character. A lot of things that will be involved in that. So, and he's obviously been listening in tonight, so thank you for that. And then Sunday, I have Dave Cosgrove, who is the head of medical at FC Copenhagen. Dave's a very well respected guy who's put together a document, it's a very impressive document, about the return to football. And his research has been done from many countries. He's in touch with a lot of people, so that'll be an interesting one on Sunday. But look, Rich, Gaz, been a fantastic insight about the great work you're doing at the club, and I've really enjoyed it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No worries.
No problem, Brownie. Thanks for having us, mate.